Hi, this is Chris from Northern Virginia.
Chris from Northern Virginia, what's on your mind? Got a lot of Virginia calls.
Hi, yeah. I've been calling for a while. You said something a couple of weeks ago about Marianne Williamson, that you wouldn't vote for her if she had a chance to win the primary election because she wouldn't have a chance to win the general election. Do you remember that?
I don't know if I said that. I don't know that I said that, to be honest with you.
Oh,
But I mean,
well, anyway.
I would prefer there was a different standard bearer than her for those positions, but I'm definitely open to supporting her in the primary. At the very least, I think it's important that she's in there raising these issues. Do I think that she has a chance to win a primary or the general election? I don't at this point, but go ahead.
Oh, no, it was more just about electoral politics in primaries. That I feel like a lot of times, like the reason a lot of people voted for Joe Biden is because they thought he had a better chance to beat Trump.
Oh, I definitely think that's the case. Don't you?
Yeah, I do. I just think that that's something that people should move away from, because that's always going to lead us towards the moderate. We'll never have a progressive.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that Bernie Sanders was equally electable.
Yeah, but I think the thing that brought Biden over, joining in late, was that he was so much more electable. He was such a safer bet.
That was the
Trump.
perception you're saying from voters. But how are we supposed to change that perception? Because during that time period,
you're saying that people should not think about electoral electability in the general.
We were making this case then because Bernie was running. We're not making this case now because Marianne Williamson's running, because we don't think she's electable.
But he's saying that we should ignore the question of electability for a general election.
But that's not
when voting in a primary.
We're not the people that this case needs to be made to. Like, the point is that we were making the same case that you're making now, caller, about Bernie. There's only so much that we can do because we're kind of preaching to the choir about Bernie. The average Normie Democrat has this view, and I don't think that's because of anything that we said in our coverage.
I mean, maybe I understood the conversation about Marianne Williamson, so I'll take that.
Well, I think you should. I personally, for me, when I vote, do I take electability in mind? I do. It's part of the calculation, of course. But let's put it this way: I think you have a better chance electing somebody that you're in favor of than you do in getting people not to think about electability in the general election. I just think that, like, it's like you're saying, like, I'm going to argue for people to have wings. And, it's just as easy to say, like, well, why don't you just argue for people to have teleportation? Do you follow what I'm saying? Like the idea that people are not going to contemplate that voters, because look, for a lot of voters, they feel that there is, if you are somebody who's, let's say, let's say you're living in North Carolina and you, want Medicaid expansion, and you've got two Democratic governors running in the primary who say, I'm for Medicaid expansion. I'm going to do this in the general election. Aren't you going to go with the one that you think is got a better chance of winning in the general election so that you can expand Medicaid?
Me personally, if I'm a one-issue voter, sure.
Okay, well,
that's my only issue that I care about.
Well, add three other issues. Raise the minimum wage. One says, I'm going to raise it to 15. The other one says I'm going to raise it to 17.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that you should vote for whoever aligns best with your policy priorities. And just because people are going to do something doesn't mean that you shouldn't or can't make a case for them not to do it or show them how it could go against their interests.
But sir,
I just don't think it's irrational. I just don't think it's an irrational thing to say like, and I think that most voters don't see necessarily the wide expanse of well, I don't know with Marianne Williamson. I think it's a difficult calculation because she's not a politician. But I mean, and Bernie is I just don't think that it's an irrational response to say that I'm going to try and vote for the person who I think is going to win. Personally, like in a primary, I might depending on the person, vote for someone who I think is not just most aligned, but able to execute those policy differences, regardless of whether, like how they might do in the general election. But the idea that like electability is never going to be a calculation. I mean, people were making an electability argument for Sanders.
But I think that in the primary, electability really just means the most moderate.
Not necessarily.
I mean,
I don't know. That was not the argument we were making about Bernie Sanders.
That's what I'm trying. Yeah, that's that. The point is that we feel differently about Bernie Sanders than Marianne Williamson. And I also think the context is very different. Biden is an incumbent.
And look, here's another thing, okay? Because particularly, let's stay with Sanders and Biden. The argument in terms of electability for Sanders was not just that he is as electable or more electable than Biden. The argument was that he is going to draw votes from a different set of people than Joe Biden would. This was the argument. People can believe it or not believe it, whatever. But he is going to create a different coalition of populist support than Biden would. And that is going to help in terms of like passing legislation because of the different types of demographics that Bernie Sanders would have attracted. Now, put aside, people can agree or disagree, but that's also important, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's in office on some level unless they have either and or institutional support and populist support. You need to have a base of power. And the nature of that base of power, Chuck Schumer like famously said, I think it was Chuck Schumer or was it Ed Rendell? I think it was Chuck Schumer, but I can't remember exactly. In the 2016 election, for every two workers we lose in Pittsburgh, we're going to pick up 3 in the suburbs. And that creates a coalition of voters, which will later constrain you or empower you in terms of pursuing certain legislations. And that is, that's an important thing to contemplate.
No, that's fair. So I only brought up the Marianne Williamson as a framing because I maybe I misheard, but that's what I heard a couple of weeks ago.
To the extent that I wouldn't vote for Marianne Williamson, and I'm in New York, right? I mean, so it's a different thing. It's not just a question of me thinking that she can't win in a general election. It would also be. It was
a weird caller that specified that she had a good chance, or she had a chance of winning the primary. Like she was even odds against Biden.
Yeah, that's insane.
In the call. Yeah, that was just a framing for the question. And again, like maybe I misheard you, but what I remember hearing, what I was responding to was you said that you wouldn't vote for her because she wouldn't have a chance in the general election.
I happen to think that she wouldn't have a chance in the general election. It would not be the exclusive reason why I wouldn't vote for her if I don't vote for her.
But I think that, and not that I'm in favor of the two-party system, obviously, but I think that in the two-party system that we currently have, anyone that wins one of the two major parties has a chance in the general election.
I agree with you.
I don't think there's...
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But I also don't think that Marianne Williamson is going to win in the primary. I just don't.
No, obviously not. Obviously not. It was a weird framing because that's the way the caller put it to you. But I think that because anyone that wins the Democratic candidacy will have a chance, at least in the foreseeable future.
Well, of course. But listen, who would you rather have, run in a general? Well, let's put it this way. There was a big controversy about the Democratic Party creating ads in certain races around the country that, and I can't remember exactly where it was. Do you remember?
That part of it was the governor's race in New Hampshire.
Mastriano. Or Mastriano is a
and
good
then also
example.
in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's like, Doug Mastriano's too conservative for Pennsylvania. And then, of course, all the conservatives are like, that's exactly how much conservative I want. And they vote for him. The fact is that worked out for the Democrats in, I think, all the races. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it doesn't, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton was convinced that she could beat Donald Trump. That was, I think, a miscalculation. The time has shown. But that means that there is an ability to at least make an assessment that one opponent might be better to face than another. And if that's the case, then it's also the case that one candidate from your side can also be better in a general election. So I just don't think I'm not saying it should be the determining factor when people vote, but it should be a factor in which to assess, because otherwise you're being silly and disingenuous, I think.
I think it's stripping out a lot of context. Just because just because she's a nice woman and I like her doesn't mean that I think that this is a necessarily.
I would never vote for Marianne Williamson. I was just using that to frame where I was coming from hearing that. I'll say I would prefer to have, and not obviously not for the effect that it would cause. I would prefer to have a real progressive Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, somebody lose to Trump in the 2020 election, then Joe Biden win, just because it shows that there is an actual progressive movement, which I don't think that we actually have. You
would rather Trump have won against Biden?
Not in an accelerationist, I want Trump to win. I'm saying that if that's what it meant to, or if that was the risk I had to take in order to have a progressive in the Democratic candidacy or as the Democratic nominee, then that's the risk I would want to take.
What happened in 2016?
Trump won?
Yeah, beat a moderate. So kind of someone's politics a lot closer to Joe Biden, right? Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, but Trump, what
did that do to the progressive movement? What did that do to the progressive movement?
I do not know.
Well, not much good.
What happened in the Supreme Court?
That's Trump beating a moderate, though.
I know, but in your calculation, Trump wins anyways, right? You're saying I would rather him win. That he would beat a progressive than to. So you're saying you'd rather win.
I would rather have the Democratic Party or the greater left of the states take a chance on actual progressive.
You'd rather them lose to Trump, so that even when the moderate lost, they still blame the progressives. Can you imagine what would happen if a progressive lost to Donald Trump? You'd be seeing what's happening in the UK right now. The expulsion of the left from the Labour Party. That's what they're doing actively right now to make sure that Corbyn can't have any influence, anyone associated with him, anyone even to the in the moderate left, like the representative from Scotland, who or the MP from Scotland, who I'm blanking on her name, Sturgeon. Yeah, that's what would happen, dude. I mean, this is accelerationism. I know you're saying it's not, but it is. And it's not. I
just don't understand what you think that's going to achieve.
I mean, if the left, okay. I feel like the argument you're making is towards maintaining institutional power in the Democratic Party, and not moving institutional power towards progressive action.
That's honestly, that is the absolute opposite of every day when I walk in here.
I believe you based on what you do, but I'm saying the argument you're making right now is about maintaining institutional power for the Democratic Party, not for progressivism.
Well, I'm asking you to explain to me how the loss of like a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren in the general election in 2020 would help the progressive movement. That's what I'm asking.
I may have misspoke there. I think what I'm more saying is I would rather take the chance of Bernie losing than have a guaranteed Biden win.
I mean, okay, I see what you're saying, but it's also like, guess what? That's not the way it works. We don't get to choose that. Would I have preferred Bernie Sanders?
I mean, collectively we do.
No, we don't, because
collectively that's what we do. That's what we do in the primary.
Hey, dude, if you were to say to everybody that Biden's definitely going to win and Bernie Sanders maybe, I got news for you. Bernie Sanders is not going to win the primary. Like, that's, you have to listen. You have to accept the nature of, like, we have a two-party system that I think has great limitations. We have a system of government that I have significant problems with. These things exist, right? They exist, though. And people are going to respond in a way that we can't necessarily control them. So the point is, you got to be strategic and tactical. And I mean, there's no way to know in 2020 Joe Biden's definitely going to win. He only won by whatever, it was like 60,000 votes across 2 states or something. There's no way to know. There's no way to know. I believe that Bernie Sanders had the ability to win in that election. Frankly, I believe in 2016, Martin O'Malley had the ability to beat Donald Trump. But the idea that it's not going to be a part of the equation, or that in your mind, what you're talking about is just fanciful. Yeah, I guess, it's just barroom talk. That's not strategic at all. Like, you can't go out and tell people you should want Bernie Sanders, even if he's got like a 50% chance of winning, against Joe Biden, who has a 100% chance of winning. I mean, aside from you not knowing what those percentages are, that's also a very bad pitch to the people that you need to vote for Bernie Sanders. I
think after a certain point, trying to strategically operate within the system, you're upholding the system itself.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's an argument. That's true. That if you operate strategically within the system, you are theoretically condoning the system. But I don't think that
not just condoning it. I think you're upholding it when, you're allowing electability to have such a factor in your electability in the general election to have such a factor in your primary election, especially when in the system you already know. Give me an example of what
you're talking about that has been effective, when it has been effective, or is this just completely theoretical?
What do you mean? An example of what?
Give me an example of when what you're talking about, not engaging with the system, has brought about, just that act of not engaging has brought about any type of meaningful change.
Any specific system?
Yeah, in our political system. I mean, there's a reason why there's been so much effort in disenfranchising voters. It's not because they think that like.
But I'm not saying not to engage in voting, though. I'm saying not to engage in that specific brand of two-party electoral politics, specifically in the primary.
You're saying in the primary you should not consider electability.
No.
Okay. I mean, I think I can if you don't want to do that, I think you can do that. But I'm saying if you go around and campaign on that, I got news for you. You're going to lose.
Mm-hmm. Most Democratic voters in the primary.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Unfortunately,
most Democratic voters in the primary want a Democrat to win. They are registered Democrats for the most part in non-open primary states. They are Team Blue. This is an unrealistic ask for an average voter who's not thinking about this in the way that you
Republican
are.
Party too.
That too, yeah. So
no, I think the people that just vote blue, no matter who, like the people that aren't like actually really looking into policies, don't really care about the primaries all that much. Like, I think I'm not really speaking to them. I'm speaking to progressives, people who actually want to see progressive change, like real progressive, movement.
I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's fine.
Those people already voted for Bernie,
listen,
though.
I am for primarying every Democrat. I think primaries are good. I think they're good.
Yeah.
And I think people, should vote for the candidate that they like the best. But also, I think, and that's fine. If there's enough people who vote for them in the primary, they have a chance of winning. I get that. I get that.
The point is, though, that
I don't think Marianne Williamson has any better chance of winning the primary than she does the general.
The point that Sam is making and that I'm making, though, caller, for you to take away from it is that to actually win primaries, though, the progressive candidate has to convince the Normie Democrats that they are electable. That's it.
Definitely. You have to. It's just one of the requirements. Appreciate the call. I mean, personally, you can have in your mind like your secret reasons for voting, but if you want to get other people to vote for that person, you've got to make the argument that they're going to win in the general election because that's what the majority of Democrats want.
Yes.
That's what they want.
Speaking of Bernie, I mean, we don't need to do this, but I sent Bradley a clip of him rallying for Brandon Johnson just because that is tomorrow.
Yes, folks, if you're in Wisconsin, go out and vote for the Supreme Court nominee. What's her name?
Janet Protasiewicz.
Janet P. Janet P. In Wisconsin.
And in Chicago, vote for Brandon Johnson. Yeah.
Get out there and do it. Very, very important races. And particularly, like, the Wisconsin race is just hugely crucial.
Although, I mean, look, this guy, Paul Vallis.
He's horrible.
He's horrible. So, Brandon Johnson, Bernie was rallying with him over the weekend. He's gotten, a lot of high-profile progressive endorsements, but Brandon Johnson's the vote, too.